Black CEO books a room in his own hotel, the racist receptionist makes a huge mistake. There are moments, Marcus Carter thought, when the world looks you straight in the eye, and still refuses to see you. Savannah's air was thick with the scent of old magnolias and sea breeze. The historic streets, cobblestone and cracked, whispered stories of grandeur and decay. Yet none of that mattered now. Not when you were standing in the middle of a five-star hotel lobby, your hotel, and felt like a ghost drifting among the living. Marcus adjusted the strap of his modest leather bag on his shoulder. No tailored suit today. No private car waiting at the curb. Just him, dressed like an ordinary traveler, blending in with the weary tourists and business nomads. At 45, Marcus Carter was the architect of an empire. From a battered apartment in South Atlanta to owning one of the most prestigious boutique hotel chains across the Southeast, his journey had been a long war against every barrier set before him: poverty, prejudice, and doubt. And he had won, not with rage, but with relentless, patient excellence. But today, excellence wasn't enough. Today, he needed the truth. Raw, ugly truth. 3 weeks ago, an anonymous letter had landed on his desk. "Guests are being humiliated at your Savannah property," it said. "They're treated differently, if they're different." At first, Marcus had wanted to dismiss it. Anonymous complaints were nothing new. But then came the second. Then the third. Then the stories started to match. Minorities denied upgrades, brushed off, made to feel lesser, not just once or twice, but as a pattern. It gnawed at him. He knew what that felt like. He had lived it. And he would not allow it to fester within something that bore his name. So Marcus had made a decision: no calls, no corporate emails, no warning. He would walk in as a stranger. He would see for himself. And now here he was, standing at the ornate front desk of the Mariner, one of his flagship properties, ignored. Across the polished marble counter, a young woman leaned lazily on her elbows, twiddling on her phone. Heather, her name tag declared in neat gold letters. Her polished blonde hair caught the lobby's chandelier light like a halo. She hadn't so much as glanced at him. Marcus smiled grimly to himself. The test had already begun. He cleared his throat softly. Nothing. He tapped the counter a little louder. Still nothing. Finally, without lifting her head, Heather mumbled, "Yeah." Not, "Welcome to the Mariner," not, "How can I assist you?" Just, "Yeah." As if he were some nuisance that had wandered in from the street. Marcus Carter straightened his back, masking the slow burn rising in his chest. He had built this place to be a refuge, a temple of dignity and comfort. Now it felt like a mockery. "Reservation for Marcus Reed," he said evenly, using the pseudonym he had booked under. Heather sighed audibly, tapping lazily at her computer, her fingers moving like molasses. "Name again?" she asked, eyes still glued to her phone. He repeated it, slower this time. She squinted at the screen, then shrugged. "Don't see it," she said, tone dripping with indifference. Marcus's lips curved into a thin line. "Here we go." Marcus Carter stood there, feeling the weight of a familiar, bitter sensation settle in his chest, the slow, suffocating realization that no matter how much success you stacked around yourself, some people would still look through you as if you were dust. He could have revealed himself right then. Dropped his name. Flashed his ID. Made Heather realize whose empire she was currently desecrating with her apathy. But no, that wasn't the point of tonight. Tonight was about pulling the rod into the sunlight where everyone could see it. He leaned forward slightly, polite, measured. "Could you please check again?" His voice was calm, but under it pulsed an unspoken challenge. Heather rolled her eyes, an exaggerated, slow-motion theater act. She jabbed a few keys with a manicured finger. "Still nothing," she said, barely glancing up. Her smirk was a small, cruel thing. Marcus pulled out his phone, navigating to the email confirmation. He held it up for her. "Reservation numbers here," he said. Heather gave it the barest glance before returning to her phone. "If it's not in the system, it's not in the system," she muttered. Marcus inhaled slowly, counting to 4. He had been here before. Not in this building, not with this woman, but in hundreds of rooms, lobbies, meetings, flights, where the rules bent and snapped depending on who you were. And even now, after all he had built, here it was again. Heather finally looked up at him properly, her eyes scanning his face in that quick, sizing glance, and what she saw confirmed whatever conclusion she had drawn at first sight. "Maybe you booked the wrong location," she said, her voice syrupy sweet and condescending. "Happens all the time." Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe," he agreed softly. But he knew better. Behind Heather, a wall of framed awards and commendations gleamed under spotlights: excellence in hospitality, top customer experience, luxury boutique hotel of the year. All meaningless now. All lies if this was how his guests were truly treated. Marcus lowered his phone slowly. "All right," he said. "Let's pretend for a second I made a mistake." Heather's smirk widened, sensing an easy victory. She didn't even bother hiding her triumph. "And if I didn't?" he asked, voice light, almost playful. Heather shrugged. "Then I guess the system glitched." She said it like it didn't matter. Like he didn't matter. Marcus's heart pounded once, heavy and slow. Not from anger. From disappointment. Deep, cavernous disappointment. Because glitches could be forgiven. Malice could not. Marcus leaned casually against the counter, pulling out a second phone, this one with corporate access. His fingers danced quickly across the screen. 30 seconds later, he found his reservation, right there, bold and undeniable. And then, with a few more taps, he found something worse. The activity log. Deleted manually. Deleted by user, Heather Thomas. Marcus exhaled through his nose, slow and silent. He smiled then, not kindly, but with a cold precision that sent a ripple of unease through the air. Heather, sensing something shift, finally looked uneasy. Marcus straightened, pocketed the phone, and asked in a low voice, "Heather, tell me, what happens when someone deletes a reservation?" Heather froze, fingers curling slightly around her phone. It's just been removed from the system." "No big deal." "No big deal," Marcus echoed softly. He tilted his head, studying her like a scientist might study a venomous insect. "And who," he asked, each word slow and deliberate, "has the authority to do that?" Heather licked her lips nervously. "Only front desk staff." "Like me," she mumbled. "Interesting," Marcus said. He pulled out the corporate phone again, turned the screen toward her, and tapped the glowing line that bore her name. Heather's face paled. For the first time that evening, she saw him. Saw him. And she knew, somehow, some way, that she had just made a terrible mistake. For a split second, Marcus Carter let the silence thicken, allowing the weight of his revelation to press down on Heather like a storm cloud about to burst. He could have exploded. He could have demanded apologies, shouted accusations, drawn every eye in the lobby to witness her humiliation. But he didn't. Instead, he smiled, a slow, almost gentle smile that somehow unsettled Heather far more than any outburst could have. "Let's try this again," Marcus said, voice velvet smooth, but lined with steel. "I have a reservation. It was here. You deleted it." Heather opened her mouth, then closed it, her throat bobbing visibly as she swallowed. "And now," Marcus continued, his tone light but deadly, "you're going to fix it." Heather's hands shook slightly as she scrambled behind the counter, tapping furiously at the keyboard. The system beeped and whirred, the sounds unnaturally loud in the growing stillness of the lobby. I found a room, she stammered after a few agonizing moments. Of course you did, Marcus said pleasantly. Which room? Heather hesitated, glancing at her screen. Room 319. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. Room 319, he knew it well. It was the worst room in the building, directly above the noisy bar, a broken view of the alley dumpsters, perpetually smelling of stale beer and fryer grease. Deliberate. Petty. Malicious. He leaned in, folding his arms across the counter. Tell me, Heather, he said softly, do I look stupid to you? Heather's face twisted in panic. No. No, sir, I just. Because only a fool, Marcus said, voice dropping into a dangerous whisper, would accept what you just tried to do. Other guests were beginning to notice. A businessman near the fireplace lowered his newspaper. A mother pulling her child across the lobby slowed her steps, pretending to check her phone. A bellboy polishing brass fixtures paused, ears tuned. The tension crackled like static. Heather stood frozen, fingers trembling above the keyboard, unable to meet his gaze. Marcus straightened, exhaling quietly, forcing down the rage boiling in his blood. Not yet. Patience wins wars, not fury. He picked up the key card she had shoved across the counter and examined it as if it were something slightly unpleasant found stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Thank you, Heather, he said, his tone syrupy sweet now, mirroring her earlier disdain. He pocketed the card, turned away slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the elevators, every step measured, every movement loaded with the power of restraint. But this wasn't over. Not even close. As he rode the elevator up, watching the antique brass numbers tick higher, Marcus felt a grim satisfaction settling into his bones. Heather had thought she was clever. She had thought she could erase him with a few keystrokes, dismiss him with a smirk. She was about to learn just how disastrously wrong she had been. Tonight wasn't just about fixing one mistake. It was about burning down the whole rotten system, and rebuilding it stronger. Tonight, justice would not whisper. It would roar. The door to room 319 creaked open with a reluctant groan. Marcus Carter stepped inside, dropped his bag onto the battered desk, and closed the door with a soft click. He didn't bother inspecting the room, he knew every inch of it. The chipped paint near the vent. The flickering light above the mirror. The sour tang of mildew that clung no matter how often it was scrubbed. Heather had handed him a trash heap and expected him to accept it quietly. But Marcus Carter hadn't fought his way through every closed door in life just to be dismissed at the threshold of his empire. He pulled out his corporate access phone and laptop, setting up a makeshift command center on the desk. Within minutes, he was deep inside the Mariner's internal system. Staff logs. Complaint files. Managerial notes. All of it at his fingertips. And what he found wasn't just troubling, it was damning. Heather's name appeared over and over again, like a stain that refused to be scrubbed away. Guest complaint dismissed without investigation, Agent, Heather Thomas. Racial discrimination report filed at check-in, Agent, Heather Thomas. Multiple incidents of reservation anomalies linked to the same staff member. Marcus leaned back, letting the chair creak under his weight, staring at the glowing screen. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't just him. Heather had been poisoning the experience of countless guests, undermining everything Marcus had built, and no one had stopped her. He dug deeper, pulling up the staff evaluation notes. There it was, another name. General Manager, Paul Adams. Marcus's mouth tightened into a grim line. He remembered Paul, charming, non-confrontational, too eager to smooth things over rather than fix them. The perfect shield for someone like Heather. The perfect accomplice through inaction. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, firing off silent commands to corporate HQ. An audit request. A guest compensation package trigger. A staff re-evaluation protocol. This wasn't going to be a quiet cleanup. This was going to be a reckoning. He gathered his devices, slid them back into his bag, and stood up. The reflection in the cracked mirror caught his eye, a man in simple clothes, but with a storm in his gaze. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his sleeves. It was time. Marcus Carter rode the elevator back down, the hum of the machinery almost drowned out by the thunder of his pulse. When the doors slid open, the lobby looked much the same, polished, elegant, curated to project effortless luxury. But to Marcus, it was a stage now. And the performance was about to change. He strode past startled guests and bewildered staff, straight to the manager's office. No knock. No announcement. He pushed the door open. Paul Adams looked up from his desk, blinking like a man dragged out of a comfortable dream into a nightmare he didn't understand yet. "Mr. Reed," Paul began, scrambling to stand. "Sit down, Paul," Marcus said coldly. Paul sank back into his chair, pale and sweating. Marcus closed the door behind him, the soft click sounding like the ceiling of a tomb. He leaned forward, palms flat on the desk, eyes boring into Paul's. "Tell me," Marcus said, voice calm and deadly, "how long have you been letting rot fester in my hotel?" Paul flinched, confusion giving way to dawning horror. "Your hotel?" he stammered. Marcus smiled, slow, cold, unstoppable. He reached into his bag, pulled out a sleek leather folder, and slid it across the desk. Embossed in gold letters. Carter Hospitality Group. Founder and CEO, Marcus D. Carter. Paul's face collapsed. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Marcus interrupted sharply. "You didn't know. You didn't care to know." He straightened up, his voice rising, clear and undeniable. "And now, everyone is going to know exactly what kind of place you've been running." Outside the glass door, heads were already turning. Guests, clerks, bellboys, the entire lobby leaning in, sensing a storm about to break. Heather, too, frozen behind the desk, her face draining of color. Marcus saw her. He let her see him. See him. No longer that nobody she thought she could dismiss. No longer invisible. He was the man who built this palace from dust. And tonight, he was tearing it down to rebuild it better. The silence in Paul Adams' office was deafening. Marcus Carter let it stretch, the weight of the truth pressing down harder with each passing second. Paul sat slumped in his chair, his carefully crafted persona of polished efficiency crumbling into pathetic ruins. "I didn't know it was this bad," he mumbled weakly. "You didn't care enough to know," Marcus corrected, his voice sharp and cutting. "And that makes you just as guilty." Outside the office, the lobby had gone eerily still. Staff paused mid-step, guests half-turned in curiosity, sensing a shift in the air, something inevitable, something unstoppable. Marcus stepped back from the desk, his silhouette framed by the broad glass window that overlooked the lobby. "Here's what's going to happen, Paul," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. Paul lifted his head, desperation plain on his face. "You," Marcus continued, "are going to walk out there, right now, and fire Heather Thomas. In front of every guest, every employee." Paul's mouth opened and closed, his face flushing deep red. "Mr. Carter, please, there's a procedure." Marcus's stare sliced through him. "I am the procedure." Paul hesitated, a trembling breath, a desperate calculation, and then he nodded. Without another word, Marcus opened the door and stepped aside, allowing Paul to walk out first, like a prisoner to the gallows. The lobby's soft music seemed to mute itself as Paul approached the front desk. Heather, still glued to her post, looked up, and instantly knew. Effective immediately, Paul said, voice shaking, "Heather Thomas, you are terminated from employment at the Mariner Hotel." Heather's face contorted, disbelief flashing into rage. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I didn't do anything wrong." Paul said nothing. Behind him, Marcus stepped into the lobby, and suddenly, Heather's protests withered. She stared at him, and something clicked. Recognition, terror, regret, all blooming too late. Guests whispered among themselves. Employees exchanged wide-eyed glances. Heather grabbed her bag, her movements jerky and furious. As she stormed past Marcus, she threw him a glare that could have set wood alight. Marcus didn't move. He didn't need to. Justice wasn't loud. Justice was final. Heather shoved the front doors open and disappeared into the humid Savannah night, swallowed whole by the dark. The lobby seemed to exhale collectively, a gust of air that carried relief, shock, and awe. Marcus turned slowly to face the remaining staff. Most couldn't meet his eyes. A few did, young, earnest faces full of fear and questions. He saw them. And he saw hope there, too. Marcus strode to the front desk, the same desk where he had been treated like an inconvenience hours earlier. He picked up the house phone and dialed a direct line to corporate operations. "This is Marcus Carter," he said when the line connected. "I'm ordering an immediate full-scale shutdown and audit of the Mariner Hotel. Effective now." The voice on the other end stammered in surprise but obeyed instantly. Marcus hung up and turned back to the staff. "In the next 24 hours, he said, voice steady and commanding, every employee will be re-evaluated. Every guest complaint will be reviewed. Every policy will be rewritten." He paused, letting the words sink deep. "If you are here to serve with dignity, you have a place in the new Mariner." He let his gaze sweep across the room. "If not, find the door before I show it to you." The young bellboy, the one who had tried to make himself invisible earlier, straightened his spine. The front desk clerks nodded, a ripple of nervous but earnest energy spreading through them. Marcus smiled, faint but real. The poison had been cut out. Now the healing could begin. Paul Adams stood awkwardly by the front desk, watching Heather's figure shrink into the night. For a long, excruciating moment, no one spoke. The elegant music piping through the lobby, a lilting piano track, felt absurd against the rawness of the moment. Then Marcus Carter turned back to Paul, his expression unreadable. "You're not finished," Marcus said quietly, his voice slicing clean through the heavy air. Paul swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sir, I took care of it." "No," Marcus interrupted, calm but merciless. "You took care of one symptom. You ignored the disease for months." The staff, still gathered nearby, pretended to be busy themselves, stacking brochures, adjusting plans, doing anything to avoid drawing attention, but their ears were trained on every word. Marcus stepped closer, his shadow falling across Paul. "You let guests be mistreated," Marcus said, voice sharpening. "You let discrimination rot the foundation of this hotel. And worse, you let your people believe it was acceptable." Paul opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Tell me, Paul," Marcus continued, lowering his voice to a dangerous murmur, "what does leadership mean to you?" Paul's face crumpled, like a dam buckling under too much pressure. I just didn't want conflict," he whispered. Marcus laughed, a short, humorless sound that snapped like dry branches. "Conflict finds you whether you want it or not," he said. "Leadership means standing up anyway." Paul looked like he might collapse right there on the polished marble floor. Marcus shook his head slowly. "I gave you a masterpiece," he said, his voice softening with a different kind of weight, the weight of betrayal. "And you let it decay." The bellboy, the same young man who had witnessed Heather's downfall, shifted uncomfortably by the elevators, sympathy flickering across his face. Marcus noticed. And it reminded him why this mattered so much more than just one firing, one resignation. It was about what these young workers saw. It was about the example they would carry forward. Marcus inhaled deeply, steadying himself. "You're relieved of your position," he said, finally. Paul flinched as if slapped. "You'll be escorted off the property tonight. Severance terms will be sent to your email." Paul's lips trembled. He looked like he wanted to beg, but some last shred of dignity kept him silent. He nodded jerkily, eyes red, and stumbled back toward the manager's office to collect his things. Marcus watched him go, not with cruelty, but with the cold resignation of a surgeon removing a tumor. It had to be done. Mercy without justice was just permission for rot to return. As Paul disappeared into the shadows of the office, Marcus turned back to the staff. No grand speeches. No declarations. Just a steady gaze that said, "You saw what happened. Now decide who you want to be." One by one, they straightened their backs. One by one, they chose dignity. The lobby, still bruised from the confrontation, began to hum with a different energy, something fragile but real. Hope. Marcus felt it ripple through the space like the first clean breath after a storm. And for the first time that night, he allowed himself a small, quiet smile. The next morning, the mariner woke to a different kind of dawn. The sunlight that spilled through the tall lobby windows seemed cleaner, sharper, as if even the very air had shifted overnight. Marcus Carter stood quietly near the front desk, a clipboard in hand, reviewing notes while staff milled around him with nervous but energized movements. There was no more hushed gossip. No more stiff, fearful smiles. Instead, there was a buzz of purpose. Marcus had spent the night leading personal meetings with every department head, every team leader, and every line employee willing to stay and listen. Not lecturing. Not preaching. Listening. Understanding. Teaching. He spoke of what service truly meant, not polished shoes or scripted greetings, but seeing the humanity in every soul who walked through these doors. He made it clear. There would be new policies, yes. New training. New checks and balances. But more importantly, there would be a new spirit. Dignity would no longer be something guests had to hope for, it would be their birthright inside these walls. And for the staff, those who rose to meet the new standard, there would be opportunities like never before. Promotions. Scholarships. Mentorship programs. The young bellboy, whose nervous glances last night had betrayed a yearning for something better, was the first to feel the shift. Marcus approached him mid-morning, offering a firm handshake and a new title, Assistant Front Desk Manager in Training. The boy, Andre, learned, had tears in his eyes as he accepted. Small ripples. Quiet revolutions. But they would spread. Marcus knew it wouldn't be easy. Systems resisted change. People resisted harder. But he also knew the truth. Empires weren't built in comfort. They were built in storms. He walked the halls of the Mariner that afternoon, smiling as he passed rooms where maids greeted guests warmly, where concierges listened with real attention, where smiles weren't forced, but genuine. Change was happening, not from fear, but from pride. As he stepped into the main lobby one last time before heading back to corporate headquarters, a group of guests approached him, strangers who had seen last night's confrontation unfold like a hidden truth revealed. "Sir," one woman said, hesitation in her voice, "were you? Are you?" Marcus smiled gently. "Just someone who believes we can do better," he said. The woman nodded, her eyes shining. "Thank you. For standing up." Marcus tipped an imaginary hat. "It's not enough to stand up," he said softly. "We have to lift others, too." He left the Mariner that day not as a victor, but as a gardener, planting seeds that would bloom long after he was gone. Savannah's air, heavy with salt and history, felt lighter as he walked into the sunlight. Behind him, in the great glass doors of the hotel, a new reflection took shape, not just of Marcus Carter, but of a community learning, healing, and growing into something better. As Marcus Carter's car pulled away from the curb, the old live oaks of Savannah stretched their limbs overhead, dripping moss like ancient sentinels. He leaned back in his seat, letting the city blur past the windows. In his mind, he replayed the faces, Andre's shy grin, the housekeeper's proud salute, the concierge's heartfelt handshake. Small moments. Quiet victories. But real. And that was how change truly happened, not with grand speeches or sweeping decrees, but with one choice at a time, one heart at a time. Marcus knew he couldn't fix the world overnight. But he also knew he didn't have to. He just had to plant the right seeds, and trust others to help them grow. The future belonged to those who dared to imagine better, and who were willing to fight for it, quietly, relentlessly, every single day. As the sun dipped low over the marshes, painting the sky in fire and gold, Marcus whispered a promise to himself. Never invisible again. Not me. Not anyone who walks through my doors. And now, I turn to you. If Marcus's story stirred something in you. If you believe that dignity should be a right, not a privilege. If you know that real change begins with everyday courage. Then help this story reach more people. Like this story to show you stand for respect and justice. Share it with friends who believe the world can be better. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories that inspire change, one heart at a time. Because the world doesn't just need more heroes. It needs more everyday warriors. More you. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.